I'm Bob Crawford.
I'm Ben Sawyer.
And this is The Road to Now.
This is The Road to Now, and this today is Will Acuff's Road to Now.
That's right. Will Acuff, our old friend, he was on the show probably, well, I want to say a decade ago, but we haven't been around for a decade. We've been around, we're recording this on May 20th, so we are into our ninth anniversary?
We're into our 10th year. We just had our ninth anniversary.
No, we started in 2016. We started in 2016.
Right, so 2015,
2025.
the beginning of the month marked the end of our 9th year. That was our 9th anniversary.
Right,
and we're now into
so
our 10th year, dude.
Yeah, 10 years. Can you believe that?
No, I honestly cannot believe that.
We would not be here if not for the patrons.
Yes, that is absolutely right.
And for all of you listening.
Yeah, and all you listening and the support from SiriusXM, but the patrons, man, Bob and I have been recording a bunch of episodes lately, and we've got this live show coming up. And, Bob's obviously in the Ava Brothers, which is on tour right now. After recovering from the cancer and everything, my career doing comedy and narration and all this stuff it feels like I didn't miss a beat, which is awesome. But there is no way I could do all this editing work. There is no way I can make sure it got out there. And without Gary Fletcher, we wouldn't be able to do it. And without the patrons, we wouldn't be able to pay Gary Fletcher.
That's right. And, I would say over the past decade, there have been times where I just felt like, we've done it and it's been good, but we got so much going on. Maybe it's time to quit, retire from the road to now. But then I always say, but people listen.
Yes.
But people listen.
We have
people who listen and like it and tell us they like it. So we keep doing it. And now we are with SiriusXM, so we can't quit even if we wanted to, not for a while at least. So you're stuck with us. Thank you for listening. Will Acuff, he's the co-founder of Corner to Corner, which is a Nashville, Tennessee-based nonprofit organization that promotes economic equity by launching underestimated entrepreneurs out of a historically low-income community. What he's trying to say is, Will is founded this organization, Corner to Corner, which is a 501c3, and what it does is it trains people in low economic communities to start their own businesses.
Yeah, and they do an amazing job of it. And we'll talk about this in this episode. I knew Will before. Bob knew Will and I knew Will, and we were friends with each other before we realized that we both knew Bob. And but the reason I was friends with Will was hanging out at Smoker's Abbey Cigar Shop up the street, kind of this local community hub. You can't not want to talk to Will Acuff if he walks in a room.
He has a vibrant personality. He's an incredible guy. He's got a book out. It's called No Elevator to Everest: Shift from Survive to Thrive Through Spirit-Led Self-Awareness.
Yeah, it's a book of vulnerability. And it was great because one of the things I love about Will is we see each other regularly. Aside from the cigar shop, we see each other at the YMCA pool. Will is like one of my friends that we hang out and we talk. And so many times I've run into him and I've watched him as he's conceiving, as he's putting together a lot of these ideas. And just to run into him and talk to him for 15 minutes, and he's just like, I've been thinking about this. And I've been thinking about, and you would listen to him working his things out. And then you'd walk away inspired for like 5 days from just listening to him talk about how much there is to be gained and how much there is to give and how much there is to learn in the world. He's just, really a fantastic individual.
After you listen to this, you'll understand what I'm about to say. Is I want you to buy the book, but I would also recommend the audio book, because hearing Will read the book is as life-giving as the book is itself. So here's Will Acuff, No Elevator to Everest. Thanks for listening. Will Acuff, welcome back to The Road to Now. It's been a while since you've been here.
Yeah, somewhere back in 2017 or 18, something like that. I've got a lot more gray and maybe a little bit more wisdom since the last time we spoke.
Well, I know you have more wisdom because you have a book.
That's true. That's actually how you know that someone's wise.
You've cataloged your wisdom here. It's called No Elevator to Everest: Shift from Survive to Thrive Through Spirit-Led Awareness. And Ben wasn't here the last time you were here.
No, so I feel like I get the A-team today. Ben, good to see you, buddy.
This is great. I just want to say up front, this is, we'll get into this conversation about, triangles and things like this and your strategies. But this is triangle's a great way to describe this, because Will and Bob were friends for a long time. And obviously I knew Bob, but Will and I got to be friends down at Smoker's Abbey Cigar Shop. And Will has this charisma. So like, people come in and out, but that's kind of like Cheers down there. Everybody knows each other, right? And I had all these conversations with Will, and I was like, man, this guy is so smart. And then one day he comes in, he's like, Ben, you know Bob Crawford? I was like, yeah, I've been doing a show with him for like a year or two to that point. He's like, oh yeah, he's a good friend of mine. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Here it comes.
Small world.
I know.
Yeah, I feel like I developed something independently with both of you and then got the benefit of sharing it all together. So it just made it extra special, guys.
Will, the last time you were here, we talked about Corner to Corner, which was in its infancy. And now Corner to Corner is thriving.
Yeah, it's wild.
So, by way of reintroduction, introduce yourself and tell us about Corner to Corner.
Yeah, so a little background on me. Nashville, Tennessee is home base. Been here for 18 years. And my wife and I moved to Nashville with the idea that we were going to live in a historically low income neighborhood so that we could get what I would describe as a theology of neighbor, right? Like, what does it actually look like to really care about your neighbor well? Not as like a one-off event, but as like a daily, kind of lived thing. And really with this core human belief, right, that community is better than not community, right? Like I think everybody's like, yeah, that probably sounds good, right? But realize in my cultural background, I hadn't been given a lot of tools on how to do that or how to think about it. And so my wife, Tiffany, and I moved in. And Tiffany is incredible. Anybody who knows her knows she's like way tougher than me. And she went and got a job working behind bars at the men's prison. And she became a former offender job training specialist, which is a fancy phrase for just saying she helped people come home from prison with stable employment, right? That moment is often like a tornado. And she gave them an anchor of stability and worked with them on that. And then we kept an open front door at our house. And so we did life with those neighbors and learned the rhythms of what was actually happening. And honestly, that was a time of so much learning and so much like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought this stupid thing. Thank you, neighbor, for being kind enough to help me see the more complicated truth and help me to see it through your eyes, not my own. Right. And it was years of putting my foot in my mouth and people being kind enough to help me take it out. Right. And eventually we saw that there was this pattern that we just couldn't help but see over and over and over again. We had these incredible neighbors with passion, drive, skills, right? But didn't have a bridge to express those in the marketplace in a way that would take a family not just from poverty to stability, but actually all the way to thriving, right? And what I mean there is we live in a moment right now where 60% of Americans can't put their hands on $1,000 of emergency cash, right? And according to the way we do the statistics, they're not considered poor. But if you can't fix a tire and go to the doctor at the same time, I don't know what else to call that, right? And so we launched Corner to Corner with this idea of what would it look like to have like a relationship-centered model, right? Like I need you, you need me. We need to be in this together. So none of that savior nonsense, right? Like I hate that in the nonprofit sector. So none of that, but rather this real, what I would describe as like an economics of mutuality. And where we centered on was entrepreneurship, because there's infinite upside if you can get the skills to plan, start, and grow a small business. And so sounds wild, right? Like, hey, let's...
Will, I actually
yeah.
heard you on another podcast recently, and you said ownership ends poverty.
Yeah, ownership ends poverty. Yeah. That's the title of the next book. No joke. I'm working on it now. Yeah.
Well, I remember years ago we were talking, and this was as you were getting things off the ground, and you were getting ready to go to speak to a group of donors, and you were like some of the great supporters. They support charities and everything. And you, kind of to summarize it, you were like, I might be going in to sabotage my entire relationship with these people because I'm not going to tell them they're going to save these folks.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not going to give them the standard script, which is you are going to do this and I'm patting you on the back. you wanted them to understand that what they were doing was assisting someone else in what they were actually accomplishing for themselves. And you were saying you're a part of it, but you're not saving. And I remember kind of you were excited but incredibly anxious about this moment. And I just wondered if you could talk about that, because that to me was like, and I talked to you, I was like so inspired from that, because you were telling the truth in a way that you said this could be it. This could be it. No, but these people might never want to talk to me again.
Yeah, well, that's still true, right? I'm still in those kind of conversations all the time, and it touches a really interesting point. We have a nonprofit culture where the donors are presented as the hero, right? And that's what inspires them to give, right? Think about all the commercials you've ever seen, where it's no different than a typical Cadillac commercial. Imagine yourself as the hero, the rakish person in the business suit who steps out of the big glass building and jumps into a Cadillac and suddenly is on a mountain road, right? And then they always pull into like a beautiful mansion in the forest and like a supermodel walks out with like an inch of bourbon in her hand, you know? And like you go, I want to be that guy in that car, right? And next thing you know, you buy a Cadillac, right? And we do the same thing with the donor story where it's like, do you see this kid who has no hope or no future without you? Imagine yourself here. And at the end of the day, I think that creates pity, and not empathy and connection, right? But anytime you're telling a different story and inviting generosity in a different way, you run the risk of alienating people. And over and over again, I've had people, some go like, yes, I've been waiting for this kind of like, let's be all in this together. And I have others who you could just see the discomfort on their face. And it's like, okay, good luck, kid. Yeah. But, where we've actually gotten to, we started with one location, 13 original entrepreneurs who came through our program. And we've now launched over 1,600. And last year we put 37 million back into the neighborhood economy. Neighbors, like one of my most favorite recent stories was this amazing school teacher here in Nashville, right? Who dedicated her life to our kids' education. And she's looking at her own son and she's going, how am I gonna, afford to get him to college, right? Like Nashville has become one of the most expensive cities in the Southeast. It is tough, right? And if you're on teacher salaries, who, by the way, if you haven't been paying attention, they're not known for being high, right? She's like, how am I going to do this? And she decided she was going to launch a solopreneur, right? Think about it like a side hustle, using the recipes that she learned from her grandma's kitchen as a little girl, right? And if you ever hear her describe like her being 6 years old and learning, how to add the dash of this and the ingredients, like by the end of it, you're crying and you also want to taste that food, right? It's a weird kind of emotional combo. But she goes, all right, I'm going to come to Corner, and my goal is $10,000 in year one, about $3,000 to overhead, $7,000 to start a college savings fund for my son.
I don't think we explained what Corner to Corner does.
Oh, yeah. We launched historically low income neighbors into small businesses that they run and own and thrive in.
You do this over the course of like a 10-week training program.
Yeah, so 10 weeks, who's your target customer? What problem are you solving? All that kind of stuff, right? What's your financial model? How do you build a chart of accounts? Legal entity type, right? So all like the fun marketing stuff, as well as the kind of nitty gritty under the hood stuff that makes a business operational for the long haul.
So a community member like the woman you're telling us about, the former teacher who has this skill, this talent, this idea, she came to Corner, and then she learned how to take that idea and make it a business.
Yeah, take an idea and turn it into a money-making reality, right? And at the end of year one, a team member is like, hey, did you hear she did over 36,000? And I was like, what? Right? Because a 10,000 goal jumping to 36,000 is pretty massive. And I called her. I was like, what happened? And she's like, well, I heard that Tennessee State University, right, one of our HBCUs here in Nashville, historically Black college, she found out that the marching band needed a new caterer. And this is the kind of marching band that has like 9,000 different types of drums. Like this is a big group of
They're awesome.
They're amazing, Grammy Award winning. But she goes, well, Will, there's two types of marketing. And I was like, oh, if there are, go on. And she's like, you can take pictures of your food and, put it on Instagram, or you can use your marketing budget to donate your product to try to close a deal. And that's what she did. And she donated her food for the marching band, took it down there. And then her best dish is this caramel crumble cake. Again, her grandma's recipe. She walked it over to the band director, waited for him to take a bite, right? And his eyes, while they were open in delight, she goes, I heard you're looking for a new caterer for the marching band. And he's like, what? And she closes the deal within 24 hours. And so she goes from 10K to over 36K, right? And now a college savings fund that her goal was maybe the beginnings of it is now at least 30% there, And now she's like, she comes back to us and goes, hey, that was a great start, but really I'd love to get this on the shelves of Kroger. Can you get me a pitch meeting with the Kroger grocery store folks? And we just had that pitch meeting, right? So it is human ingenuity and creativity given the opportunity to expand, right? But with support. So that's what Corner to Corner does.
So we're going to get to the book in a minute, but Corner to Corner is a 501c3.
That's right.
Right. So you have had to, over the years, go out and raise money.
I sing and dance for my dinner and for the dinner of this work.
And I'm not talking from personal experience, but if you have lunch with Will, you may have to write like $100,000 check at the end of the meal. You may be compelled to write.
Bob, you don't have to, but you get invited to.
Right, you get invited to. I mean, and what?
It's an open invitation. Doors open.
I mean, Will is the kind of guy, and you could probably just tell by his vibe and his energy this far into this conversation. Will's not afraid to ask somebody for $1 million. He's
Correct.
not, he has no fear. So, but we're at a moment, Will, that like since January, where government aid has been drastically reduced. How has that affected Corner to Corner, and how are you getting around it? And how are to your knowledge, other 501c3s navigating this new terrain?
Yeah, great question. So first, I would just say that we are in the most volatile year in the philanthropic community in the United States that we've ever had as a category. And the reason is when you shut down USAID and you shut down, kind of federal level poverty alleviation programs, right? Or if not all the way shut down, at least diminish, right? Pretty significantly. And then you see a follow-on effect where more conservative-leaning states are basically taking that as a playbook, right? So they're not picking up additional slack at the state level. They're also cutting programs, right? You end up with this scenario where we have an overcrowded fundraising market, right? Because those groups are based in the US and they're looking for support. They're not trying to stop their work, right? And most of the biggest foundations in the US, they give out of their interest earned, not out of their primary, right? And so if they were supporting, say, 10 groups the year before, 5 of them are coming to them going, hey, would you please double your giving this year? Otherwise, we're going to close, and they cut their roster. And so I think by the end of this year, you're going to see a ton of small and mid-market nonprofits close their doors, right? And part of this is too the incentivization structure for nonprofits. You get grants and they might be $1 million, but you have to spend them in 12 months. Like that's the deal. It is not like a for-profit where you build up a big cash reserve or something like that for you to buffer in times of volatility. And so, the way I think about this as, someone who's trying to encourage my team at Corner to Corner is we are going to innovate our way out of this because the need has not stopped, right? To put a fine point on it, Nashville is known as a booming economic city right now, and yet we're in the bottom 5% for economic mobility in the nation. That means if you're born poor here, you will stay poor without significant or sustained intervention. So the need is massive. And so the way we're approaching this is we have to develop channels for more earned revenue. So the nerdy answer is we're going to take our core expertise, right? The 10-week program, how to plan, start, and grow. And we are productizing it. And I'm building a sales channel into churches specifically. And the reason being, and maybe you guys were going to kick out of this, is, many conservative Christians basically said, "Hey, government, we want you out of poverty alleviation," right? But this is like somebody who hates their car so much they got rid of it on a Friday with no way to get to work on a Monday, right? The churches, by and large, have not built anything to replace this gap. And so many of our neighbors are going to be experiencing significant need. And so that's what I'm trying to do, so that Corner to Corner doesn't have to strictly rely just on donor support, but we can have some earned revenue support as well.
Something that's I've always been amazed by Corner to Corner is that when you think about, I'm just going to be as blunt as possible and try to be appropriate at the same time. Think about the Republican-Democrat divide, and you think about how each party approaches poverty in the inner city and the crisis that it is. You talked about aid and just giving money, to someone, and it's kind of it is a savior type of a thing, right? And then the conservative is the pull yourself up by your bootstraps type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you've really impressed me because you've had conservatives. I mean, I'm talking not even the past 3 months. I'm talking over the past 4 years, 5 years, and some big name conservatives have come to you and said,
"Yeah,
we love the way you're doing it," and you really are. The Corner to Corner model is a dream for the Republican Party. If they embraced it, if they fully embraced it, it's a dream come true because it is shining the best light possible, the most humane light possible on what they've always been saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think what we're trying to do is to say, this is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is a neighbor issue, right? This is what it looks like to look at your incredible neighbors and go, I want more opportunity for you and with you, and in a way that brings something beautiful to my community. Like there's an ice cream shop down the corner from my house, and it's the only ice cream shop in my neighborhood. And it was a Corner to Corner graduate. You know who's pumped about that? My 9-year-old daughter. Like this is not just saying, oh, I'm gonna give. This is I'm also going to receive, right? And I think the tension I sometimes feel in the political realm is, one, it's so binary and we lack a moment for nuance, right? Like we hate nuance so much right now as a country, and it's so dumb, right? But the Republicans, would look and say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and they underemphasize the effects of systems, right? And systems being at play. And then on the left, you'll have somebody who treats a poor neighbor as an object of pity, right? As if these amazing neighbors don't have agency, right? And in my experience, they minimize that. And I don't think either party is getting it all the way right. And we need a third way. And I think the third way is to see your neighbors as badasses and then figure out ways to build meaningful things together, because people do brave things together, right? And so, yeah, that's the heartbeat of the work.
That pity thing, like either you have full agency and you're spending it incorrectly or you are suffering your own earned circumstances, or no matter what, you're always going to be a victim, and you've just simply got to. That has driven me crazy. It's one of the things that frequently I think whenever I'm talking to people, the me not having a partisan allegiance here, usually when we get to that point, it shines because you see it. You're right. I mean, some people will be like, well, no one wants to just live off of, the basic minimum you get from food stamps. And I'm like, I've seen that. But then other people are like, well, the people have earned it. And you're like, I see people working 2-3 jobs and not being able to keep it together. And, recent report, in Nashville, Will, we live in the same city, in the same part of the city, really. And, number one, the highest gentrification rate in the country of any city.
In the nation. Yeah. And we have a need for 90,000 new homes. in order to meet current demand. And our mayor recently said, hey, we've got to come up with a more collaborative solution.
Well, you mean knocking down the small house next door and putting up two giant, tall, skinny houses that sold for $1 million a piece? Constantly producing double the number of houses that are unaffordable isn't going to solve the problem. Because I've heard that millionaires are having a real hard time finding houses these days.
Yeah, it is. As someone who lives on a block that is, I have Section 8 housing on my block, and we have two new houses that just went up for like 1.4 million each, and they're right next to each other.
So, Will, when you first moved there, the three of us have another mutual friend who lives in Nashville, and he moved into a lower income neighborhood, but it was at the moment like there were Tennessee Titan people moving into his neighborhood, building houses, but your neighborhood still was not. Your neighborhood had not been gentrified, and we're going back a decade probably at this point.
Yeah.
And so now here you moved into this community on purpose, right? And there's a new community arising around you. What does that feel like?
Honestly, it feels like an incredible opportunity.
You mean you're going to walk up to those brand new houses and ask them to write $100,000 check?
I know, and you know that you can afford this.
Yeah. No. It's funny. I didn't think of this as a fundraising play, but now I will. But I'm more so like, at the end of the day, I think MLK had it right when he said, I refuse to let you make me an enemy, right? We cannot flatten people into these like characters, right?
No.
People aren't tropes. And so like, when I think about, the neighbor who's buying the $1.4 million home, living across the street from a neighbor that Tiffany and I have walked with for 15 years, right, through some really hard situations, I wonder, what does it look like to create a space where they get to actually see each other as neighbors, right? Is that possible? What would that take, right? And so that when I say opportunity, I'm more talking about that, right? Because I've seen over and over again, left to kind of, whatever the general drift of the day and age that we're in, right? People will isolate, right? You move in, you buy the new home, and you wait for it to feel like you want it to feel. And then you start to kind of emerge and engage with the neighborhood, right? And I think there's a different way. I think we can do things that start to foster, little bridges of community. And to me, that's like at the heartbeat of Corner to Corner is we actually need each other. Otherwise, we're creating neighborhoods with no neighbors, and that sucks. Who wants to live there, right? Like, I don't want to live in a place where I don't know who's around me, and they don't even have any window in my life where they don't have a chance to care for me, and I don't have a chance to care for them.
Let me ask you this, Will. We haven't had you on since George Floyd, COVID, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You said when you were introducing yourself to the audience, you said, I moved into this neighborhood. I put to help, right? To be a part of this community, to like serve.
Yep.
I put my foot in my mouth 1,000,000 times.
Yeah, at least.
My neighbors were kind enough to take it out for me. And you had told me, before Corner to Corner even existed, you talked about gaining the trust of your neighbors, like going to the community center, like figuring out, okay, community center, this is the heartbeat of this neighborhood.
100%.
And you went in there and people were very suspicious. And you're like, hey, I'm going to start a jobs training program. And people were like, what is this guy doing here? George Floyd happens. We all, the rest of us realize the side of the divide we've been raised on and we've been living on.
Yeah.
The foot that we've had in our mouth forever. You had already been through it, had been accepted by the community that you live in. And now we're post George Floyd, where there's been a reaction against what we all learned.
Yeah, to say the least.
So you kind of watched all this, because I'm sure after George Floyd, everybody called you and wanted you on their podcast to explain what was going on.
Well, what's funny, they didn't, because we had at Corner to Corner, we always said we'll start something, but we don't want to be like the center of it, right? And so like we transitioned, we hired one of our graduates to run the program, the academy, Shayna Berkeley. She's an amazing leader. And after she was running the academy, she scaled it from like 3 sites to 13 locations, right? And And in that period, we said, hey, we want to develop a leadership plan where you take over as executive director, right? So in that moment, they were all calling Shayna to have Shayna on the podcast, right? Which was awesome. Um, and then behind the scenes, I would say there were some Christian evangelical types calling me, going like, hey man, like, so it turns out like maybe structural racism is real. What should we, do about it? How should we think about it? And we had some really beautiful like moments, and I saw some real healing, right? I don't want to diminish that. And I saw, to give an example on the corporate side, there was something like $2.2 billion pledged post George Floyd's murder, to go to investing in Black and brown economic equity, right? Like that was its goal. And 2.5, 3 years later, there was around 2% of that cash deployed. And I talked to one of the managers, right, of $100 million fund. And he said, what's happening is all of this money is looking for companies to invest in with Black and brown founders, but who are already at the 50 to $100 million in revenue mark, right? And I was like, well, the gap is 13% of white men own businesses on average compared to around 0.5% of Black women. And by the way, that's not my stat. That's not like some hippie, social justice stats. That's Goldman Sachs stat. They are good at capitalism, right? So come at me, bro. That's their number, right? And so if you're looking for companies that are already at the 50 to 100 million in revenue mark, guess what? You're looking for a needle in a haystack statistically. And the money was not willing to come far enough down where it could be immediately useful. And then in the reaction post that those programs have been quietly dismantled. And let's get really specific, like, 18 to 20 months ago, or actually further than that, maybe 24 months ago, after the Supreme Court dismantled affirmative action, we saw that all these companies stopped doing their, economic equity work because they were worried about getting sued. And I'm not like blaming them. Like that's, if you're a for-profit business and your primary motive is like shareholder, dividends, okay, like you don't want to jeopardize that. I get it. But what it meant was, in addition to there being a federal gap and a USAID and all that stuff, there's also a corporate gap. But statistically, if you're going to do poverty alleviation work, right, at least let's just zoom in on the southeast of the United States, you are primarily talking about Black and brown neighbors, right? Not exclusively, but primarily. And so you're in a weird place where now in the state of Tennessee, it's like, guys, I want to build bridges. We want to do this work collaboratively. And also some of the way it's being framed in the public sphere is that our work is like almost illegal at this point. You know what I mean? And I did not see that one coming, like how severe the change was going to be.
Well, it's insane. And, it's like people, you acknowledge this thing, which is if you're going to do poverty alleviation in the South, right, it's going to be disproportionately with non-white males, with generally with non-white people. And it's like that stat goes into like feeds people and they go, see, it's like, I mean, we've talked about this on the show many times before. I just feel, the obligation to acknowledge that's what happens when at every turn, the moments that generated wealth in the country were like those opportunities were systematically denied to Black folks, like with the post World War II GI Bill, with even with the early, the settler colonialism, right? It's like you take away the opportunity for Black folks to move out there. It's a logic, there's a logic to it. But I think it's interesting because I want to get at attention here, Will. All right.
Ooh, let's do it.
So I'm with you in the sense that like you don't make enemies, right? Like even with with the people moving into these big houses, like they're my friends, right? We're dealing with the system, right? You gotta separate the individual from the institution, right? Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, there are people who would say, well, yeah, these corporations these people gave this money to these things in the wake of George Floyd because it was good PR for them.
Yeah.
And the minute it became bad PR, it's gone.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Because you're looking in the faces of the people who are making these decisions. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's fair to be that cynical, or do you think there's something more at work here, or how do you work with that?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think that cynicism is an agreement with death, right? Like, I think it is an agreement that this thing is so decayed that we can no longer look for hope here, right? So, like, when I start from that heart posture, right, I go, oh, wait a minute. Do I really want to believe that this thing is totally dead? And my answer to that is always no. Now, I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish, right? And go, this will be easy to change corporate view on, on moving the needle, right? I don't, but I also want to be intentionally bearing a position of hope when I come into any space, right? I want to be
Right.
honest about what your leverage point is. Oh, you care about good press. Cool. I'm like, so tactically, Ben, I'm not spending a lot of time going to corporate partners right now. I'm not, because that would be a waste of my time. You know what I mean? Instead, I'm spending time with people who are motivated to see high impact and center their neighbor in the story, right? And for me, right now, that is the major donor audience, right? People who are like, whatever, can write are gonna give $5,000 this year to some philanthropic cause. They've already decided to do that. And right, my opportunity is to invite them into this, or family foundations, right? Where there's a lot less red tape. Nobody even knows about them. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they get to leverage their wealth. But what I've found, when I first started this work, like, I don't want to paint a picture like I've arrived at some sainthood, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. But like, because when I first started doing this work and I saw the lived reality of my neighbor and I saw how desperate it was, right? Like, I was filled with a kind of rage and heartbreak, right? It was sorrow. And I remember driving down to this, like, beautiful gated community thing one day for, like, it might have been like a kid's birthday party kind of thing we're invited to. And I'm driving and I notice my knuckles are turning white on the steering wheel, right? And I was like, oh, what's that about? Oh, I'm furious at the gap. And I'm furious that I don't know how to wake people up to the need of their neighbor, right? But that anger, right, turned inward so fast, man, and made me bitter, and invited kind of like a hollowing out of self rather than a flourishing of self. And so I learned years ago how to let that go. And so that's the hope that I try to embody when I step into any new spaces.
So I think you have just perfectly segued to your book. If you're listening to this and you're listening to Will, you're thinking, man, this guy is motivated. This guy is a go-getter. Man, he must work 12, 13, 14 hours a day. And you would be right. But
No, you're
but
wrong.
but there's another side to Will. And it's, I think what is really at the heart of this book is raising a child with special needs.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
So
Yeah.
tell us about Raylan.
Yeah. So, our family story, Tiffany and I, we've been married over 20 years. And even in our dating life, we talk about we wanted to adopt as part of our, like, family story. And so we adopted our son from the hospital. Actually, true story, Bob, you guys were down there in Memphis and you sent food to the hospital,
Yeah.
for us because Raylan was in the NICU.
This is when we met. Like, I just want to tell this story. We were on our first journey at St. Jude, and this has to be 2012, and in the spring of 2012. And Will and Will's father, Mark Acuff, who is one of my best friends, came to visit us. They came to visit us, and it was just a really just so needed and powerful. And I remember you brought me the Brennan Manning, what do you call that when you read it every day? Devotional.
Devotional. Yeah.
Devotional.
Yep.
Oh man. But anyway, yes, I remember. This is around Easter, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Ah, man, good memory.
And we should add here, just to everyone listening, that Will's father is a pastor, and Will,
Yeah.
has been, and Will was raised with the pastor as a father, which is a shaping experience.
Which is just part of the book as well, like, which is like part of your origin story, which we
Yeah.
should get to as well.
Yeah.
Choose your own adventure, Will.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll start with Raylan. We brought him home from the hospital. Everything is on track on the normal stuff. He's our first kid, right? But around age 2.5, he stopped sleeping through the night, and not like the typical kind of, every young parent goes through some fuzzy nights, but it was days that turned to weeks, that turned to months, that turned to years, multiple sleep studies, surgeries to improve oxygen flow, like all the things. And that was our introduction to the idea that we are on the path of disability, right? Um, and I think all of us can relate to these moments in life where we think we're going one direction and then we get T-boned, right? Um, and there is a before and there is an after, right? Um, and I think early on, naively, we were like, okay, we'll get the diagnosis and it will come with the playbook and we will know what to do and then we'll keep marching forward. But what I found was, no. This is a journey of commas and not periods, right? Like we're getting another diagnosis and then another diagnosis. And the challenges grew and grew. And in the face of that, and I have permission to share this from Tiffany, but through Tiffany's own kind of traumatic experiences, she was diagnosed with complex PTSD in this time, and experienced acute clinical depression, right? Like not getting out of bed kind of variety. And so I've got this hyper intense situation at home, right? Meanwhile, outside, like quarter to quarter is everything looks up and to the right, directionally correct, And at home, I am dying. And a big part of that was because I only had one mode of being. It was problem solution, right? You find a problem, you fix the problem. Well, guess who does not respond to that, right? Kids with special needs, and wives experiencing, mental health challenges, right? And I got to this place of, I wouldn't describe it as burnout because, I was still really functioning outside, but it was like deep hurt and pain and sorrow and just confusion. Like, what do I do with this, right? And in the midst of that, Tiffany had found this amazing trauma therapy retreat, like an intensive, and she went. And when she came home, there were the seeds of like new hope happening, right? And there was something, when you see somebody starting to transform, you're like, ooh, what is that there, right? It had that sense. And she looked at me and she's like, hey, you have to go too. And I looked at her and I was like, aren't we therapized enough as a family? By the way, just pro tip, don't invent words to debate your partner, right? Like that's not a good move. And she was like, no, you have to go. And like she drew a line in the sand. So I end up going a few months after she did. And day one, I'm there with a chip on my shoulder. I'm here to get, words and tools to fix my wife. Like that's my framework, right? The arrogance. Oh, dear Lord. And by the end of day two, I am cracked open and connecting with myself in compassion and curiosity versus condemnation, right? And I had this transformative experience. I was like, I can't ever go back. Like I can't live how I was living before. But then that fear jumps in, right? Oh man, I'm about to go back to the same context. Like it's one thing to do this here at this beautiful retreat center, where they took away my phone, where I'm not getting up at 2 a.m, with my child. It's another thing to do it in the sometimes the trenches of my everyday. And so the shift that I made was starting to look at my own life as a joy lab. What would it look like to shape a life around creating joy no matter my context? And so I came home and I just started working on a notebook of just all these ideas and practices and daily rhythms that could facilitate that kind of new life, no matter what was happening outside of me, right? Because I couldn't wave a magic wand and fix some of these things, right? I needed to learn a new way of being. And so that's what happened. And y'all, it sounds crazy, but like I've experienced more joy over the last 4 years than I ever knew was possible. And my context in many ways has just gotten harder.
Well, one of the concepts, because your chapters you break down, by kind of broad concept and relationship and kind of strategy for solving or trying to maybe not solve, but work with the life's problems. One of the ones that resonated with me was this when you talk about codependency, because it's like a word you hear thrown around a lot, but really digging into it, I think it was useful for me because I think, Will, you and I are both we are both fundamentally optimistic. I mean, that is the thing about both of us. And we walk into a room and we want to share that with other people. And because that does work a lot of the time, it feels good. And we forget that sometimes that can be selfish. And the concept of codependency, I'd never come across it like this before. It's, I expect because I feel this way about something, you will feel this way about something.
Yeah.
And your refusal to go with me, it feels like a betrayal. And that I was like, oof, that hit close to home. And could you talk about that and how that shaped your life? Because I mean, that to me, the codependency thing hit home hardest.
Yeah. So, first, this term codependency gets thrown around a lot. It is not an official diagnosis of any kind, right? Like you're not going to get a codependent diagnosis. But what it essentially means is I'm only okay if you're okay, right? And every single one of us can name relationships where we function like that, right? At work, at home, wherever. And I think, part of my son's journey is emotional regulation is super hard, right? So if I am expecting my emotional regulation to happen because of my son's, right? It's a recipe for disaster, right? So because my situation was so kind of dramatic, it forced me to go, wait a minute, but do I want to live that way anywhere? Right? I was like, actually, no. Right? I want to show up fully as myself, right? 100% responsible for my own physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being, right? I want to be with you, person I love and care about, wherever you are, and not demand that you come and be where I am, right? And so to your point, if I'm coming into a room optimistic and somebody else has all of the vibe of I will stab you right now, sir, right? For that smile, right? That it's not my job to hero them out of that, but I can meet them with curiosity. Hey, it seems like you're feeling this way. Am I getting that right? Oh, actually, yeah. Thank you for noticing, right? Is there any way I could be supportive? Honestly, I just need to be in it right now. Okay, cool. I'm here for you if you need something. Like that energy versus what I used to do of let me fix you. Can I make you happy? Is there anything I can do to make you happy? No, you're not happy yet? How about this and this, right? Like almost like this puppy dog energy. But for
Yeah.
the certain type of person is it could go murder. Like I could, remember that movie Roadhouse, the original back in the day? Patrick Swayze, his greatest film ever, by the way. He does this karate chop to a dude's throat, right? That is the kind of energy that sometimes I would get back from people in the face of my optimism. Yeah. And so it's learning how to go, oh, I'm not gonna change how I'm coming into this space, right? I'm gonna own that because this is me. But I'm also not gonna try to force or change you. I'm gonna meet you where you are.
I couldn't think of two other people to have this conversation with that'd be better than like Will and well, obviously we're here for Will's book, but Will and Ben and we've all been through the shit, in our own ways. There's no secret I have a special needs child and she doesn't sleep. And I always tell people about her is if I wanted her to be like I want her to be, right? If my happiness is dependent on some idealized life for her, I'm going to be endlessly bitter and,
Yeah.
endlessly angry. But if I see the world, if I jump into her world and see the world as she sees it, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. And that's codependency as well, because she's not coming to she's not going to meet me halfway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I have to go to where she is, and she is not she does not regulate her emotions very well,
Yeah.
as well. And there is a lot of that coddling and a lot
Yeah.
of bargaining with her, with a toddler and a teenager's body.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know you reading and listening to your book. And listening was almost more powerful for me because we're such good friends. And it was just like you were just telling me this story the whole time. But I mean, I just can't tell you, and even with the relationship with your spouse, and I just, completely identify with this book in so many ways, and I just congratulate you for your vulnerability. And
Thanks.
when we talk about you talk about being a hero or being a victim, that is something that's called in the biz is it the drama triangle?
The drama triangle, man.
Okay, so explain that for everybody. What is the drama triangle?
Yeah. So this psychiatrist back in the 60s came up with this idea, Cartman, and it's that you have a hero, villain, and victim, right? Like on a triangle. And in a lot of human interaction, it is the norm to run the bases on the drama triangle, right? So think of the hero as the person who's going to overfunction to try to save the day, right? They're going to do more than their 100% responsibility. They're going to take on 150, you know? The villain is going to blame and shame others, right? And so they're gonna there's a lot of like, you idiot energy, you know what I mean? Even if they don't straight up say it, that's kind of the vibe and the tone. And then the victim is, I am at the mercy of these other things, right? It's a denial of agency often, right? And so like an actual example of how this plays out in our life. And I'll say this, before learning this tool and starting to walk it out. I would come home from work and let's say my son's having a really hard time and Tiffany is working with him, but it looks pretty chaotic and stressful, right? I come in the house, that's the first thing I see. I'm an overfunctioner, right? Like hero is my first move often. And so I run up, I take over for Tiffany and usher Raylan to a place where he can get calm, whatever, right? And meanwhile, Tiffany's just standing there looking mad at me, right? And then I later I go, hey, what was that all about? I was just trying to help. And she's like, I didn't ask you to help, right? And I'm like, whoa. And she villains me, and then I run over to victim. Why won't you let me help you, right? And in the space of just like a couple minutes, we've been all over the map on this thing, right? And where we've gotten to now, where we've transitioned, not all the time, not perfectly, right? I don't want to paint a false picture, but it's like, if I come in now and see that happening, I'll say to Tiffany, hey, how could I be helpful right now? You know? And she might say, I've got this, right? Like, this is just normal. This is a Tuesday. Would you go check on our daughter, right? See how she's doing. Go be present with her, right? Okay. I go and I be present with my daughter, check in with her, and we're done, right? Like Tiffany is a grown up. She has told me what she's doing and what she needs, and I can trust that, right? Oh my gosh, what a revelation to step off of that drama triangle moment, right? And it has led to a dynamically better relationship, not just here at home, but in everywhere for me.
Well, I feel like we could talk about this all day. We're coming to the end of our recording session. And so I want to make sure that we talk about what I thought was really, there's so much profound in this book. I should add to everyone, it comes with suggestions on how to try to apply this. A lot of breathing, a lot of taking ownership over what you can control, while at the same time learning to live with the world around you. But I like this chapter on scarcity. I really liked this chapter. And your contemplation on this Bible verse of the concept that what we need is actually provided for us. If we, I guess I could pull it out and quote it, but it's basically like, look at the bird. He's not storing anything. He's not going to work. And yet God has provided him all that he needs.
Yeah.
And your meditation on this, could you talk about this some? Because I feel like we live and we are so often forced into this mentality of scarcity, which I think sometimes it's real, sometimes it's imagined. But could you talk about that and how you kind of learn to live within a world, as you say, of the nonprofit where your goal is to not make money?
Yeah, exactly. We're the only thing that apologizes for making money. Yeah. I'd say first, most of us get a money story that's rooted in our childhood that didn't come with like an official lesson, right? Like we get it kind of through osmosis in our home life and the conversations we half understand while getting dropped off at school in the morning, right? Like those kind of things. And that was my story. And what I learned was, for me, scarcity was also wrapped up in the faith's kind of language, right? Like if you want to be a good Christian, and I'm using, air quotes here, then you should also be poor. And there were a lot of ways that was kind of, taught to me. And so, of course, like it would make total sense for me and to design a family around being downwardly mobile, you know, for like a nonprofit, right? Like that was always going to be the plan,
Downwardly mobile.
right? Like recently, Tiffany said to me, "I am tired of having this little money. Could we do something about that?" Um, and so I I think it's no matter what background you're coming from, scarcity is the agreed upon view of the world, right? I just heard this stat that despite how many millions of people will starve this year globally, right? We have enough food available to feed everyone 2.5 times over, right? So it is false to say that we don't have the stuff. We do, right? It becomes this question of kind of distribution and what hoarding does to a community, right? And also, I'd go so far as to say what it does to your heart. And so, what I mean is, for me, money meant that I was safe. If I get enough money, then I will feel safe. But then because of my uninvestigated scarcity stuff, as soon as I got, quote, enough money, I'd do something to have not enough money subconsciously, right? And then I'd go back to feeling, okay, good, good, good. Now I don't have enough money. So, like I would repeat that pattern. And so what I would encourage anybody to do is like get curious about those moments where money changes your mood, right? Does having a certain number in the bank account make you feel safer and more at peace? You know, is there a level there for you? Is there something you would do right now, to have an adventure with your family, right? Or to maybe serve a neighbor in need, but you won't do it because you feel like you have too little, right? And then get curious. What is too little? What does that actually mean? You know, I think for so many of us, we have lizard brains that are still tuned to see the bear around the corner, right? Even though there's not a bear, right?
Yeah.
And so our brains are telling us you are not safe yet, and you won't be safe until you can provide for every potential financial hurdle that not just you, but the kids to the fourth generation will experience, right? And unless you have that, then you should not give to neighbor or invest or think more generously or take that trip, whatever it is for you, you know? And that's the unwinding that I think needs to happen for so many of us.
And you say, and this was, I thought was great. I remember because you talked about this decision to go to Costa Rica with your family for the summer because you have special needs kids. You have to be there with them, right?
Yeah.
I remember you telling me about this, running into you at the YMCA pool, and you saying we just decided to go to Costa Rica this summer.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny because you see that and you're like, whoa, what? But as you point out, there was something that was manageable for you. It was just that the mentality of scarcity had convinced you couldn't even look into doing that.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the reality is, a week in, or rather a month in the place of Costa Rica we were going was like the cost of a week in Florida, right?
Yeah.
So it was not a financial thing. It was a mental thing. And then as a family, affected by disabilities and the complex ways that families meet increased need, right? Like we all love our kids. These are amazing kiddos who are just, I can't describe what a gift my son is, right? And also tons of need, right? But in the face of increased need, we often get smaller, right? We try to play it safer. We won't stay in that hotel because we could get kicked out because of this thing that, whatever it is. And so for us, it was a willingness to go, wait a minute, we could actually do this. And what would be the parameters that would allow it to be successful? And so, like, we've gone 3 summers in a row for a whole month, and we spend it in a mud road surf village, 45 minutes away from a gas station. This is very rustic, right? Like, my daughter has learned how to scoot scorpions out of the shower, right? And I'm convinced that is only going to make her more of a badass as she gets older, right? And now it might be actually why she goes to therapy one day, but time will tell. But the bigger idea is what would it look like to name and explore these subconscious things that we often just push down to go about our day? What would happen if we met them with curiosity and compassion and they go, oh, do I still want that to make the decision for me?
Curiosity, that is a word that permeates this book. And I think it's one of the lessons you want us all to take away from it is to be curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we go, Will, not a problem to be solved, but a person to be known and enjoyed. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, this to me is the kind of the moral centerpiece of the whole book, right? And it first started with realizing that I was not a problem to be solved, but a person to be known and enjoyed. And I think so often in Western culture, like even how we do education and here's the pathway and you better get this grade and go to this school and have this career, right? Everything is kind of framed in this performative way. And for me, the lesson I took was, oh, I'm a problem to be solved. And it set me up to be on the hedonic treadmill. One day in the future, I'll be okay, but I'm sure not okay right now. Right. And as I started to heal that and like go, oh, wait, like I actually like me. I could be, someone I enjoy. It helped me to see that I was approaching others that same way, right? Like you're a problem. And as I shifted into, no, you are not a problem to be solved, but you're a person to know and enjoy, it changed my relationship with my son, with my daughter, with my wife, with colleagues, right? And then ultimately for me, like coming from a place of faith, I realized that I had always done faith. Like I was a butterfly scientist who had to kill the butterfly and pin it down to understand it. And that's how I approached who God was, right? Like, I'm going to figure you out, God. And I got to this more, dare I say, mystical place of going, wait, no. God, the creator, is a person to know and enjoy. What would it look like if I moved into the world with that heart posture? And it changed everything for me on all fronts.
You also quote one of my favorite quotes of all time by C.S. Lewis. We must lay before him what is in us, not what ought to be in us.
That's right. Yeah, tell the truth, man. Or as somebody else said, tell the truth to yourself and the rest will fall in line.
Somebody said that at some point.
Somebody said that in a song.
Will Acuff, I love you. I'm so glad
Love
that
you too,
joined us.
buddy. Yeah, this has been a joy and a blessing. I could do this for 9 more hours if I didn't have to go raise money.
That's right. I was about to say, Will just texted us that he had to go because he's got to ask somebody for $100,000.
Yeah,
It's $1 million today. It's $1 million
today.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you guys who are listening, it doesn't have to be. I am a monthly donor to Corner in a very small sum, very paltry amount. You could be too. Will, it's cornertocorner.org, right?
That's
is
right.
the website. And
Yep.
where else can people find you?
Yeah, so you can get the book on Amazon, No Elevator to Everest. You can also check out noelevatortoeverest.com, subscribe to the Substack, and then on Instagram, I'm just Will Joy Acuff, all one word. I kind of accidentally gave myself the middle name Joy because there was a baseball coach from Lipscomb named Will Acuff. So he kind of stole my thunder.
Is he related?
Probably because there's like 9 of us, but I don't know him yet.
Will is related to Roy Acuff.
True story.
Really?
He grew up with my
Music fans.
grandfather.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a pleasure. We'll see you.
Yeah, thank you, Will.
Guys, thank you.
See you around the neighborhood, man. Thank you for listening to The Road to Now. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell the world by giving us 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts or 5 stars on Spotify. Or spread the word directly. Just text a friend maybe or share a link on social media. Anything helps and we appreciate it. And if you've got a friend who hasn't gotten into podcasts yet, let them know they can hear us every weekend on SiriusXM's POTUS channel 124. Now is the time when we say our special thanks to our supporters on Patreon and give a shout out to our Washingtonians. That list is Tanya Marsh, Mary Hawking, Tim and Caitlin Wells, Fig White, Matt Williams, Team Martin, Ann Williams and Frank Edwards, Nate Farrer, Jennifer and Magnolia, Chris and Teresa Adams, Joy Avery, Edward Carlson, and Aaron and Derek Garrison, our newest patrons, and I've been waiting to say their names out loud for a while. Aaron and Derek Garrison, that's incredible. Thanks to all you guys for supporting us. If you want to support our work and maybe get on that list, you can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/theroadtonow. You'll get extended versions of select conversations, extra episodes, bonus materials, and more. That's all available at patreon.com/theroadtonow. For more on the show, visit our website, theroadtonow.com, where you can easily search our back catalog and quickly find links to content. Why is it so good? 7 Ages Design. That's who made it. If you're looking for a website, go check them out. The Road to Now is hosted and produced by Bob Crawford and me, Ben Sawyer. Our associate producer is Gary Fletcher. This episode was edited by Gary Fletcher, and our theme music, like pretty much always, was by Paul DeFiglia. For Bob Crawford, this is Ben Sawyer. Thank you for listening. Take care.